Thanks for clicking on this video. The clip that you're about to watch came from my Twitch stream that I do Thursday nights at midnight. And to check that out, you can go to twitch.tv/Retro Reprise. There's going to be a description down below. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. I hope you enjoy. And we'll go over stuff. So today, like I said, I went and saw Ready Player One. I saw it early in the afternoon. Hardly anybody was in the theater, so there's probably about 10 of us total. And we saw Ready Player One. I've been really excited about it. In fact, I did a podcast with 2BT, so you can check them out at nerdylegion.com. The 2BT podcast. I sort of have an open door policy with them, so I can go in and talk with my buddy Dave, who is one of the members of the show there. And we went and did a full podcast on the book of Ready Player One and the things that we wanted to see from the book to the movie. And to be perfectly honest with you, a lot of the stuff that I wanted to see never really showed up in the movie. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into sort of a general review and also sort of compare and contrast what's going on there. So overall, my overall feeling on the movie, I'm not a movie critic. I'm not someone who sits there and I can tear apart somebody's, videography or cinematography or anything like that. But just sort of as a general audience member, because I knew what went on with the book, I thought maybe that has sort of tainted my view of the movie. But in general, I think most people will enjoy it. I wouldn't say it's one of those movies that you just feel excellent about, but it is one of those movies where you can watch it and enjoy it and maybe get a little bit of something out of it, but you're not going to feel like this is just an awesome movie that you just got to watch repeatedly. Now, you may want to watch it repeatedly because there are so many Easter eggs and references and everything in there. Now, a big thing to understand about the book is that generally, with all the references that were going on with it, it's usually within sort of the Gen X time frame. So you're looking at 70s through the 80s time frame, and the book heavily references that. Where the movie spends a bit more time with a bit more modern characters. You have a character from like Overwatch. You have Master Chief and characters like that, Street Fighter characters. Chun-Li shows up a couple of times in the movie. So you're seeing more of today's pop references in the movie, and that's something that I thought, well, that's just inevitable. That's just something that's going to happen with the movie itself, because you have to make it a wider audience. Gen X is sort of a generation where we're a bit smaller. We don't have that. We're not as big as Gen Y or millennials or even baby boomers. We're really one of the smaller generations out there. So having a movie based off of that book that really dives into the Gen X side of things probably wouldn't be too profitable. So I think that there was some studio decisions made to make the movie a bit more modern, and that's really understandable. So I don't really hold a grudge against the movie for that. Now, if you're not familiar with Ready Player One, one of the things that they've played up a lot of, and this is in the book, and from the book you'll see that there's a lot of Willy Wonka references, and even in one of the previews they play, a Willy Wonka song over it. They've just orchestrated it versus the Gene Wilder singing on it. So with that. I would have expected a bit more Willy Wonka like not necessarily references, but sort of thematic things that were going on. And in the book, you definitely get that. In the movie, not so much. So we're going to talk about some differences from the book to the movie. Now, in the movie, it pretty much starts off action, and that's something to keep in mind here with this as well, is that there's a lot of action in this movie. And they concentrate on that, where the book spends some time character development and some world building. And that's something that I feel like this movie lacks, especially with something as wide as the Oasis. It would have been nice to have a little bit more world building there. to kind of give people an indication as to what's going on. So I felt like the movie lacked a little bit of world building in both the real world and in the Oasis, in the VR world that they have. So a good example of this is in the book they talk about, and first of all, like in the book it takes place in 2044. In the movie it's 2045. Small details like that, it really doesn't matter. If it's 2045 sounds like a better, it's not a round number, but you can contemplate it a bit better. It's visually more interesting, I guess, or storytelling wise, as far as a movie standpoint, it might be more interesting. So you have that. The movie takes place in 2045, Columbus, Ohio. In the book, it takes place I believe, in Oklahoma City, and then he transfers. In the book, he goes over to Columbus, Ohio. Again, small detail. That doesn't really matter all that much. But what does matter is the setting. Now, in the book, they really hammer it in. They really establish that you're in the world has been depleted of fossil fuels. They've got global warming has gotten bad. Overpopulation has gotten bad. The book really does hammer that in, and so it gives you this indication of how bad the future is. But in the movie, they do kind of touch on it, but really don't spend a whole lot of time on it, and that makes it so the future doesn't seem as bleak as what the book puts it. And in general, when you're in a sort of in a general theme of everything, the book itself is a lot darker than the movie. In the book, one of the main characters dies. In the movie, they don't, and I'll get to that in a little while. So in the book, Parzival, I think, is probably a little bit younger, because he still goes to school in the book. He's going to high school. And here's where some of that character development happens. So I'm not giving anything away here, but the sort of the plot of it is that James Halliday, the guy who created the Oasis, he dies. And when he dies, there's a YouTube style video that just pops up, and he basically tells everybody in the world that he's got an Easter egg that's hidden somewhere in the Oasis, and you have to go find it. And whoever finds it gets like $500 billion, and or like $3 trillion, something like that. $500 billion and the Oasis, they get control of it. So that's laying out sort of your Willy Wonka thing, your golden ticket side of it. And as far as the movie's concerned, that's about as far as it gets. But in the book, you really start to see some things. Actually, there is a reference in the movie where somebody pulls Parzival away from a crowd of people. And it's just like Slugworth pulling Charlie Bucket away from the crowd. So there is a little bit more of a reference, but that's about it. That's really what you get. So in the movie, it just kind of opens with him talking about the Oasis, and then they get started on their first big set piece, which is this race. And you've seen this in the previews. You've got different cars. You've got like the 60s Batmobile, and the Akira bike, and all of these different vehicles there. And they do a Mario Kart style race where it's, there's crazy obstacles to get around, and they basically have to avoid getting smashed by King Kong. Now, if you make it to the end of the race, you can get the first key. And in the book, it's a completely different scenario altogether. Now, this is where I'm saying the book has some significant changes and more thematically close to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is the fact that we really get hammered in that Parzival is poor. He doesn't have a lot of money. And in the Oasis, and this is something that, again, they didn't really establish too well in the world building in the movie, that it cost credits, which is it's essentially like a Bitcoin for the Oasis. And that Bitcoin is pretty much the only thing of value. So the US dollar's gone, or it's not gone, but it's not good. And so people work within the Oasis. They have credits, which is sort of their cryptocurrency, to buy things. And so not only do they buy stuff within the Oasis, but they also buy food and things to live and physical suits and things like that. So in the book, Parzival doesn't have money to go places. He has H, who's his friend, and they'll basically loan him some money so he can get on a transport to go to a different planet so he can earn enough credits to basically transport back to the school planet where he spends a lot of his time. Now, in the movie, they do say that Halliday dies, and it takes 5 years before anybody really finds any significant piece of information. And I feel like they could have built that up a little bit differently. Because in the book, Parzival really is studying Halliday. He sort of has an obsession with him already, and so he really does spend some time listening to Rush and playing Atari games and other computer games that Halliday played, and he studies everything. And that gives you a sense that he is spending his time actually going out and studying Halliday and all the stuff that he's done. In the movie, you don't really get that sense. You kind of get a sense more that he kind of just lucked out. Like, some dude found out that they need to do this race in order to get the key. He does find a hint to help him win the race, so he's the first one to get the copper key and put himself on the scoreboard. But in the book, they do spend a more time character building, and really makes you feel like he's not just, a Gary Stu, if you will, where he's just, oh, I found this thing out, I'm going to go do it, and I won. But it's one of those things that I kind of fight with, because when you're condensing a book like that into, a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, you're going to have to cut corners. But I really felt like that was a big scene to really establish him as a character and his motivations and why he is as good as a gunter as he is, which is short for egg hunter. And it's because he spent years, at least 5 years of his life, studying Halliday. But that's kind of not really told in the movie. Now, in the book, the first way to get the copper key, since he can't go out too often, he can't go visit planets very much, he's on the school planet. And with him being stuck on that, that's actually where the first key is at. And then he has to basically play a game of joust with the Lich King from a D&D module, a really popular D&D module, and then that's how he gets the key. And to me, that, first of all, I'm a huge Joust fan. I love Joust. That's one of my favorite arcade games. And actually, if you haven't played Joust 2, you need to play that. That's actually, Joust 2, in my opinion, is better than the first Joust. But not a lot of people know about Joust 2. But Joust is one of my favorite games. It's a game that I really, really enjoy. And that was one of the things I really wanted to see on screen. I wanted to see him play Joust against the Lich King. And instead, what they did was they changed it up for that Mario Kart style race. So I can see why they would do that. Playing, having two people playing an arcade game may not be visually interesting. But I feel like they could have done something different to show what they were doing. They could have virtualized the game, so they were actually riding on the ostriches or something. So it's one of those things, again, like, I understand why they did it. That race is something that they can do, they can make visually interesting. They can siege the hell out of that thing and have King Kong running around and trying to beat people down and smash cars and all that stuff. So I could see where they do that, and then that also references into King Kong. So one of the big things to keep in mind is that you really can't do a one-to-one translation of the book for a couple of reasons. Like I said, first of all, most of the references are more Gen X oriented. So unless you want to just appeal to Gen X, you're really not going to get a mass audience for it. So they opened up some of the things, and also in the book, getting the licensing for everything that's referenced in the book is probably really hard for a studio to do. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So I understand a lot of the changes, but I still think thematically there's some things that they could have stuck with in order to keep the movie closer to the book, or at least have... Here's my big issue, I guess. The movie doesn't feel like the book. The movie has a bunch of action set pieces, which is fine, but you root more for the character if you had a little bit more background on them, and I feel like that's something that we should have gotten with the movie. A lot of that was kind of breezed by, so that's a big thing. As far as the actors did a fine job. I didn't feel like any one of them did a better job than one of the others. It was just sort of, they were there. They did their job. They didn't seem like particularly bad actors or good actors. They kind of did their job, and it was good. Now, visually, it's a good-looking movie. And especially if you're a gamer, and a gamer in today's environment, you're probably going to enjoy this movie because you're going to enjoy all the references that are in the movie. So I do recommend it for people who, if you play Overwatch, it's cool to see characters from Overwatch show up. It's cool to see Chun-Li show up. And people my age, it's cool to see, the Battletoads show up on screen. So you do get those references, you do get those things going on. So it is nice to see that. But the overall story from the movie, to me, seems bland. And I feel like they could have just taken a few more elements out of the book to really pump that up. So that's one of my big things, is that the movie's a little flat. And that could be that, yeah, you're translating a book to screen. You have to understand that you're condensing a book to, a 2-hour movie. So there are things that are going to be lost, but I feel like there were things that they lost that they could have kept in to kind of keep the movie a bit more interesting. So the world building, really establishing the real world, and kind of establishing more points with the Oasis itself. Now, in my podcast with 2BT, which I'll leave a link below so you guys can check that out, in the world building side of it for the Oasis, you not only have worlds, dedicated worlds. So what I'm talking about is Parzival goes to a school. That school is on a school world that, you can't earn credits. You can't go attack people. There's certain rules that are set up. And so there's certain areas or zones that are set up as well. So what Dave from 2BT referenced was you can't take a starship into a zone that is not science fiction. Let's say it's a fantasy zone. Get ready. Fantasy zone. So, for example, if you have, let's say you have the Enterprise, and you cross from, a science fiction zone into a fantasy zone where it's wizards and warriors and dragons and things like that, you have to go get, for example, a space slug to go drag you back into your science fiction zone, because the fantasy zone does not have science and technology in it. So people who are interested in first person shooter type of stuff, you can't just cross over into a Hobbit Tolkien type of world and start shooting up the place. You have to obey the rules of that particular zone. And within that zone, there are planets, and certain planets are dedicated to certain things. So there could be a planet that's just of particular movies, or in the book there's reference to a planet that's all arcade layouts of different arcade places around the world, and that's the entire planet is made up of arcades to go to. They don't really establish that in the movie, and I felt that was a big point to say within the Oasis. You only visit a few places, and I can understand that in a movie, but I felt like they needed to really establish what the scope of the Oasis was like. and they didn't really do that in the movie too much. The movie itself is a pretty fun watch, and so I would recommend it to people who, if you got nothing better to do over the weekend, go check out Ready Player One. I'd love to see more stuff like this get made. So even though I didn't feel like it was, I didn't feel like it really captured the essence of the book. It's still a fun movie to watch. It's a light movie to watch. It's not going to blow your mind, but it is a decent movie. It's fun to watch, and I think most people will enjoy it. And especially if you're a gamer in today's world, I think there's more to it that you would enjoy than, say, someone like me who really enjoyed the book that referenced back to more 70s and 80s type of stuff. So that's my general review. Go check it out. I think it's worth checking out.